June 4, 1942. 10,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean near Midway Island. Lieutenant Junior Grade William Hall pulled his F-48 Wildcat into a desperate climbing turn, his engine screaming in protest. Above him, 3 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters moved with an elegance that seemed impossible for machines of war. They rolled inverted, dove with predatory precision, and climbed at angles that defied everything American pilots had been taught about the limits of aircraft performance. Hall's wingman, Ensign Charles Brewer, never saw the burst that killed him. One moment, his Wildcat was there, solid and real. The next, it was tumbling toward the ocean in pieces, severed by 20mm cannon fire from a Zero that had appeared as if conjured from thin air. Hall survived that day, barely. His combat report, filed aboard the USS Enterprise that evening, contained a single sentence underlined 3 times by his squadron commander. "This aircraft is superior to ours in every measurable way." He was wrong, but he had no way of knowing that yet. This is the story of how American intelligence, industrial power, and one crashed airplane on a remote Aleutian island transformed the most feared fighter in the Pacific from an invincible weapon into a flying coffin. It's a story told through captured documents, intelligence reports, and the words of the men who flew against the Zero and lived to understand its secrets. To understand the Zero's fall, you must first understand the terror it inspired. On December 7, 1941, American forces in the Pacific had never seen anything like the A6M0. When Zeros appeared over Pearl Harbor, streaking down from the morning sky with red circles blazing on their wings, they moved with a grace that seemed to mock the laws of physics. The Zero could outturn any American fighter. It could outclimb them. It could outrange them by hundreds of miles. At speeds below 250 miles per hour, it was simply untouchable. Commander Minoru Genda, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, had built his entire strategy around the Zero's capabilities. His after-action report to Admiral Yamamoto contained a prophetic assessment. "Our fighter superiority is absolute. American pilots show courage, but their aircraft are primitive by comparison. The Zero will maintain air dominance for the foreseeable future." By February 1942, the evidence seemed overwhelming. In the Philippines, Major Jesus Villamor of the Philippine Army Air Corps filed a desperate intelligence report after losing half his P-26 pea shooters in a single encounter. Enemy fighter demonstrated turn radius approximately half that of our aircraft. Climbs at impossible angles. Appears constructed of different physical laws than known aviation science. Over Java, Dutch Brewster Buffalo pilots reported similar helplessness. Flight Lieutenant Gustav Goslings wrote in his final report before the Dutch East Indies fell, "We are shooting at ghosts. They dance around us like insects. Our bullets pass through them without effect, while their cannons destroy us with single bursts." The psychological impact was devastating. American pilots developed what flight surgeons called zero fever, a form of combat stress manifesting before missions. Young men who had trained for months, who believed in American technological superiority, were being sent to fight an aircraft that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of aerial combat. June 3, 1942, Aleutian Island, Alaska. Flight Petty Officer Tadayoshi Koga banked his Zero fighter away from Dutch Harbor after the second day of attacks on American positions in the Aleutians. His aircraft had taken a single hit, nothing serious, just a round through the oil return line. But oil was spraying across his windscreen and his gauges were climbing into dangerous territory. Koga radioed his wingmen that he would make a precautionary landing on Aleutian, a small island the Japanese had designated as an emergency strip. The island appeared deserted. The tundra looked soft enough for a wheels-up landing. It wasn't. What appeared to be soft ground was actually marsh grass covering bog. When Koga's Zero touched down at 90 miles per hour, the aircraft flipped violently forward. The impact snapped Koga's neck instantly. His wingmen circled overhead, saw no movement, and assumed correctly that their comrade was dead. Japanese doctrine was clear. They were to strafe the crashed aircraft to prevent capture. They tried, but their cannons jammed in the cold air. After 3 passes with no results, low on fuel and facing deteriorating weather, they turned back toward their carrier. Tadayoshi Koga 0 sat in an Aleutian swamp for 28 days before a U.S. Navy patrol plane spotted it. The significance of the discovery cannot be overstated. The Americans had captured dozens of wrecked Zeros, but every one had been burned, shattered, or deliberately destroyed. This aircraft was virtually intact. Lieutenant William Thach, part of the recovery team, described the moment in his official report. The aircraft was inverted but structurally complete. Paint was barely scratched, cockpit instruments intact. We realized immediately this was the intelligence breakthrough we've been praying for. By September 1942, Koga 0 had been transported to Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego, carefully restored to flying condition and designated Koga 0 in his honor by the Americans who understood what his death had given them. Lieutenant Commander Eddie R. Sanders, one of the Navy's best test pilots, climbed into the cockpit for the first flight. His post-flight report, classified top secret and distributed to exactly 47 officers, contained revelations that would reshape the Pacific Air War. The document began with specifications. Maximum speed, 331 miles per hour. Service ceiling, 33,000 feet. Range, 1,600 miles. Turn radius at 200 miles per hour, 785 feet. Time to 20,000 feet, 7 minutes, 27 seconds. Armament, 2 20mm cannon, 2 7.7mm machine guns. Then came the analysis that changed everything. Aircraft demonstrates extraordinary low-speed maneuverability, achieved through radical weight reduction. Total weight, 5,300 pounds. By comparison, F-4F Wildcat, 7,900 pounds. F-6F Hellcat prototype, 12,200 pounds. Weight reduction achieved through elimination of armor protection for pilot, self-sealing fuel tanks, structural redundancy in wings and fuselage. Airframe constructed of extremely thin aluminum alloy, approximately 60% thickness of comparable American aircraft. Control surfaces aerodynamically balanced, providing light stick forces. At speeds below 250 miles per hour, aircraft can execute maneuvers impossible for heavier Allied fighters. However, critical weaknesses identified. Above 300 miles per hour, control surfaces become dangerously heavy. Aircraft demonstrates poor high-speed dive characteristics. Ailerons lock up, making high-speed rolling maneuvers impossible. Structural integrity questionable under high G loads. During test dive to 400 miles per hour, airframe produced severe vibrations and alarming stress sounds. Most significant weakness, complete lack of protection makes aircraft extremely vulnerable to gunfire. Single 50 caliber hit to fuel tank results in immediate catastrophic fire. Lack of armor means pilot casualty rate will be high from even glancing hits. Recommendation: engage Zero only at high speeds. Avoid turning engagements below 250 miles per hour. Use diving attacks to build speed, then disengage in high-speed climb. Concentrate fire on fuselage and wing routes where fuel tanks are located. Even brief hits will likely result in fires. Commander John Thach had already begun developing tactics before Koga 0 arrived in San Diego, but the captured aircraft confirmed his theories with hard data. Thach, commanding VF-3 aboard USS Lexington, had lost too many pilots to Zero attacks in early 1942. He spent his nights filling notebooks with diagrams, working through the geometric problems of fighting a superior turning opponent. The solution he developed became known as the Thach weave. His tactical document distributed throughout the Pacific Fleet in August 1942 was elegant in its simplicity. Fighters operate in pairs. When enemy attempts turning engagement with one aircraft, his wingman turns toward the engaged fighter. This forces enemy to choose, break off attack or accept shot from wingman. If enemy commits to original target, he flies directly into the second fighter's guns. If enemy breaks off, the original target escapes. Do not attempt to outturn Zero. Use speed and altitude. F-4F Wildcat can outdive Zero at all speeds. Use this advantage. Attack from altitude, dive through enemy formation, do not turn, extend away in high-speed dive. Climb to altitude and repeat. Zero pilot expects turning engagement. Deny him this. He will become frustrated, make mistakes. Patient application of hit-and-run tactics will wear down even experienced opponents. But tactics alone weren't enough. American industry was about to deliver the weapon that would exploit every weakness the captured Zero had revealed. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation received the test data from Koga Zero in October 1942. The F-6F Hellcat prototype was already in development, but the captured aircraft data allowed engineers to optimize specifically for fighting Zeros. The design philosophy was pure American. If the Zero won through lightness and agility, the Hellcat would win through power and protection. The specifications told the story. Where the Zero weighed 5,300 pounds, the Hellcat weighed 12,200 pounds fully loaded. Where the Zero had no armor, the Hellcat had a quarter-inch steel plate behind the pilot and self-sealing fuel tanks that could absorb multiple cannon hits. Most critically, the Hellcat's 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine gave it a top speed of 380 miles per hour and a climb rate that matched the Zero below 10,000 feet and exceeded it above that altitude. Lieutenant Commander Paul Ramsey, part of the Hellcat test program, flew mock combat against Koga Zero in December 1942. His report was enthusiastic. At speeds above 250 miles per hour, Hellcat dominates completely. Zero cannot follow in dives. Zero cannot escape in climbs above 15,000 feet. Hellcat can absorb punishment that would destroy 3 Zeros. Recommend aggressive tactics. Attack at high speed, use superior firepower, accept hits knowing aircraft protection will save pilot. The Hellcat entered combat in August 1943. Within 6 months, the kill ratio in the Pacific had reversed from 3-to-1 in Japan's favor to 19-to-1 in America's favor. June 19, 1944, the Philippine Sea. The battle that American pilots would call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot represented the complete reversal of aerial fortunes in the Pacific. It was also the moment when the Zero's transformation from predator to prey became undeniable. The Japanese launched 373 aircraft against Task Force 58, including 230 Zeros. American carriers launched 450 F-6F Hellcats to meet them. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Lieutenant Alex Vrachu, a VF-16, flying from USS Lexington, shot down 6 Japanese aircraft in 8 minutes. His gun camera footage, preserved in Navy archives, shows the deadly efficiency of American tactics refined over 2 years of learning the Zero's weaknesses. Vrachu's combat report was clinical. Engaged group of 9 Zeros at 20,000 feet, dove through formation at high speed, pulled up in climbing turn. Zeros attempted to follow but fell behind due to poor high-speed performance. Reversed, dove again. First Zero caught fire from 2-second burst. Pilot did not escape. Repeated tactic 5 more times. Each engagement lasted less than 2 minutes. Zeros unable to counter diving attacks. Tried to engage in turning fight, but American speed advantage made this impossible. By the end of June 19th, the Japanese had lost 243 aircraft. The Americans lost 29. Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's top ace who would finish the war with 34 kills, flew Koga's captured Zero after the Marianas battle. His assessment report was distributed to all fighter squadrons. Having flown both aircraft, I can state definitively the mystique of Zero superiority was always an illusion. The Zero is an excellent aircraft for 1940, but this is 1944. American fighters are faster, tougher, and better armed. More importantly, American pilots now understand that you don't fight the Zero on its terms, you impose your terms. Speed, power, firepower. The Zero cannot compete on these metrics. By late 1944, Japanese commanders understood what their pilots had known for months. The Zero could no longer compete as a fighter. The aircraft that had once dominated the Pacific sky was obsolete, outclassed by American technology and tactics. The solution they chose was born of desperation. On October 25, 1944, 5 Zeros loaded with 250-kilogram bombs deliberately crashed into American escort carriers off Samar. It was the first organized kamikaze attack. The pilots didn't need to dogfight, didn't need to survive, didn't need the aircraft to return. They just needed to get close enough to crash. The Zero's weaknesses became irrelevant when the mission was suicide. Lack of armor didn't matter when survival wasn't the goal. Poor high-speed handling didn't matter when the final maneuver was a terminal dive. Light construction became an advantage, allowing larger bomb loads. Ensign Yukio Seki led that first organized attack. His final letter to his wife, discovered after the war, revealed the psychological burden. The Zero that once made us invincible now makes us desperate. We cannot fight them fairly anymore. The Americans have too many fighters, too tough, too fast, so we become the weapon ourselves. The production numbers tell the story of industrial annihilation. Between 1940 and 1945, Japan produced 10,939 Zero fighters. The United States produced 12,275 F-6F Hellcats alone, plus thousands of F-4U Corsairs, P-38 Lightnings, and P-51 Mustangs. But quantity was only part of the equation. By 1945, American pilot training had expanded to include 600 hours of flight time before combat deployment. Japanese pilots were entering combat with less than 100 hours, sometimes as few as 40. When experienced Japanese pilots died, they couldn't be replaced. When Americans died, fresh pilots arrived with better training, better aircraft, and tactical doctrine refined through years of learning the Zero's every weakness. The captured intelligence from Koga Zero had been distributed throughout the American military. Every pilot in the Pacific knew: stay fast, stay high, dive through them, don't turn, use your protection, use your power. The mystique was gone. The fear was gone. The Zero was just another target. By August 1945, the Zero fighter that had terrorized the Pacific in 1941 had become a relic. American fighters had achieved complete air superiority. Zeros that managed to get airborne faced ratios as high as 30-1 against them. The final statistics were brutal. Of 10,939 Zeros produced, approximately 9,200 were destroyed in combat or accidents. The aircraft achieved roughly 12,000 kills over 4 years, primarily in the first 18 months of the war. After mid-1943, the kill ratio collapsed. In 1953, former Zero pilots and American aces met at a reunion in California. Among them was Saburo Sakai, Japan's second highest scoring ace with 64 victories, and Commander David McCampbell. The conversation was recorded by a Navy historian. Sakai spoke with characteristic honesty. The Zero was a beautiful aircraft, but it was designed for a short war. We thought the conflict would end quickly, that our superior training and tactics would win before American industry could respond. We were wrong. When you captured that Zero in Alaska, you learned all our secrets. We had no secrets from you after that. Every weakness exposed, every tactic countered. By 1944, climbing into a Zero felt like entering a coffin. We all knew it. The American pilots knew it. The only question was which mission would be your last. McCampbell's response was equally candid. We feared the Zero until we understood it. That captured aircraft saved thousands of American lives. Once we knew it was light, we used our weight. Once we knew it was slow at high speed, we stayed fast. Once we knew it burned easily, we aimed for the tanks. The mystique died in a laboratory in San Diego. After that, it was just mathematics. Today, only a handful of flyable Zeros remain. Koga's aircraft, the one that changed everything, was destroyed in a 1945 training accident when an American pilot ground-looped it at North Island. But its legacy lives in archives across America. The test reports, the tactical manuals, the gun camera footage showing Zeros tumbling from the sky in flames, the intelligence documents that transformed terror into understanding. The Zero's fall wasn't a single moment, it was a process. From invincible myth in December 1941 to understood opponent by September 1942 to obsolete liability by June 1944 to desperate kamikaze platform by October 1944. One crashed aircraft in an Aleutian swamp had revealed every secret. American industry had built the weapons to exploit those secrets. American pilots had developed the tactics to apply those weapons. And Japanese pilots had paid the price for their commander's miscalculation about how long the war would last. In the end, the Zero fell the same way Japan fell, through underestimating American industrial capacity, adaptability, and will to learn from every mistake. The aircraft that seemed unstoppable became a death trap, not because it changed, but because everything around it did.